Today I am doing a tutorial for Design Mania for 2024. I am super excited to be back and able to share another tutorial with you. So today I am going to teach you how to make an ombre framed soap. There are multiple steps. This is like a 3-day process to create. You can do a one color or two color, you cannot do a one color. You can do a 2-color or a 3-color ombre, or you can do more colors. If you're new to ombres, I recommend starting with just 2. If you've been making ombres for a while, then go ahead and try 3 or 4. I'm gonna give you some tips for making an ombre that I think will be helpful. I also have a full video with, it breaks it all down. Like, it is a very comprehensive video. I will link that, so you can definitely check that out too. But you can see here, I'm gonna go from light green to dark green, back to light green. Because that's the color scheme I wanted to do. I'm using colors from Just Pigments, apple green for the light and blackish green for the dark green. They are probably my 2 favorite greens. They're just awesome greens. So the first tip is color matters. You want to pick colors that kind of blend well together. So green to dark green, it's going to give me a nice subtle, just gradient from the 2 colors. Red, orange, yellow, blue to purple, that works well. Green to blue to purple. The rainbow colors work well. You just want to do something that is going to have a nice transition between them. So that's the first thing you want to think about. Then you need to think about the separation of colors. So if you're doing a 2-color ombre, my rule of thumb is 70 to 30. 70% is the lighter color, 30% is the darker color. That's going to give you a smoother ombre than an equal split. For multiple colors, it's a little bit different. And again, I do have a tutorial on how to do a multicolored ombre with lots of tips and tricks. For this, I basically did a 1 to 2 to 1 split of my color. So there's 1 portion, 2 portions, and my other green is 1 portion. So check out that video because it gives you all the tips and tricks. It breaks it down, tells you how to calculate your colors. It will be very helpful if you're new to making ombres. Second or third, your fragrance is very, very important. You want a slow mover, a trusted slow mover, because this takes time. So you need your fragrance to not accelerate your soap in any way. If it does, you're going to have a harder time creating a really smooth ombre. Temperatures are important. I will work at all random temperatures and mix when my lye and my oil aren't quite the same for a lot of soaps. But when I am making an ombre, I make sure that I'm working between 90 and 100 and that my oils and lye are within 10% or 10 degrees of each other. Because I believe this helps keep the soap from tracing faster. So pay attention to the temperatures of your color. Note that colors can accelerate trace. Titanium dioxide is known for being a culprit of that. Partly it just depends on how much colorant you're using and whether it will do this. So just know your colors, use something that you are comfortable with and behaves. Tip 6, you're going to be pouring more into the mold than you're pouring into the cup. So you can see here that what I pour into the mold, right, or into the cup, I'm going to pour more into the mold. If I poured equal amounts, this cup would never get lower, and then you'd have a whole bunch of leftover soap at the very end. So with each pass, you're pouring a little more into the mold than what you poured into the cup. The more, okay, so that's tip 6. So let's move on to tip 7, where each pass does not have to be equal. So like right now I'm mostly pouring, you know, 1, 2, 3 passes, but I could just pour 1, 2. I could pour 1. I could pour 4. Like I kind of look at how much soap I still have in my cup and in the ombre and how it's progressing, and I decide from that. Sometimes I'm like, oh shoot, I'm not gonna have enough soap, so I do just single passes. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I have too much, so I will pour a little bit more and do 4 passes. This is a feel. This does take time to learn, so definitely, you know, it's probably not going to be perfect the first time. So just keep that in mind. You do not have to pour equal amounts into the mold each pass. You're still going to get that ombre as long as you're pouring a pass each time, whether the pours are equal or not. Which that will lead us into tip 6, or I'm sorry, tip 8. Patience. Patience is required. You have to have patience. As you can see, I have done a ton of passes, right? And I'm over 20. I haven't been keeping track. And this is just the first color between the first 2. So I'm still going to have to do this with between the second and the third color. But the more patience you have, the more passes that you are willing to do, the smoother your ombre is going to be. So you can do less passes and pour more into the soap at a time. Your ombre just won't be as smooth. That's okay. I said it's not. You can do whatever pleases you when it comes to your passes. But if you want a super, super, super subtle, smooth ombre, the more passes you do, the better you're going to achieve that result. So my final tip is trust the process. So this is it's part of making a good ombre is feel. I know it's really hard to describe feel, right? It's something that you will learn the more you make ombres. Like you just start to get a feel for how much is too much. Oh, do I need to pour more here, less here? Color balance, all of that. So just remember, part of it is the feel, and that's okay. And you know, we'll start to learn that as you do it. But until you start to get that feel too, trust the process. Do these steps, don't deviate from them. Even if it looks like it's going all wrong, chances are it's still gonna turn out okay. I can't tell you how many times I was like, oh, this didn't go as planned. And then when I cut it, it's gorgeous. I was like, oh, this is really pretty. Okay, cool. So just don't abandon it, even if it feels like it's going all wrong. A lot of times, even when it's not going perfect, you can still actually get a pretty ombre, a pretty soap. So just keep going. Don't give up. So those are my 9 tips for making an ombre. So definitely check out the links to the 2 videos I have if you want more information in greater detail and a breakdown of the math and all of that. Otherwise, stay tuned for part 2. I'm going to go ahead and just speed this up, finish pouring the ombre, and then tomorrow I'm going to come back and show you how to cut the frame. And then once we have the frame, we will make the second part of the soap. Welcome back. Time for part 2. So I have unmolded my ombre. I already, so you can see I got alien brains on top of this in a portion. So I just trimmed off the top of my soap so that it was all nice and smooth. So you can see there's that nice subtle ombre from green to dark green to light green. Okay, so I have my nice loaf. So now I need to cut it up. So what I use is this is the Hercules cutter from Custom Craft Tools. They also sell a larger one, which the name is eluding me, but it'll come to me. But if you search for the Hercules cutter, it will come up. I adore this cutter. It is so versatile. It has been worth every penny, but you can use any type of log splitter cutlery that you have. So this is their newer version, which you can see has slots and increments of 1/8, so it can cut tons of different sizes, widths, thicknesses, and then it can also cut bars too, so it's multi-purpose. I need to split my frame up. So I have set, I don't know if you can see, my wire is on the second notch. I've just set it on that. That's going to cut me a thin frame. You can do whatever thickness frame you want. I like this, I just like this thickness. I think it gives a nice balance to the soap and the inside design, and so yeah, I like it. Now I am going to cut the bottom, flip this over, cut the top, and then cut the sides and the sides. We want to create a box. I find it's much easier to have the bottom and the top piece because the top piece will sit right on top of the sides. If we cut it this way so it doesn't like sink in, it's just, I prefer that way. You could cut side side, bottom bottom. You just want to create a square. So you also need to make sure you keep the direction of each piece the same. Otherwise, if when you line it up, you will get a frame that is not the complete ombre that we poured. Now, when we cut this frame, we're going to be left over with everything that's inside, right? A big chunk. I will show you some ways that you can use up those pieces. But for now, let's cut the frame. And then once we have the frame cut, we can then go make a second batch of soap to fill in the frame. So I am going to basically pull this through and cut the bottom piece. So you can see, if I can get this off. Come on, there we go. Okay. So there's my bottom piece. Subtle ombre, but the majority of this is that light green. So that's gonna go back in my mold and sit on the bottom. Okay, right? So that's in there. So now I need to pay attention and make sure I keep the direction the same. So I cut it this way. I'm going to flip it over this way, so I'm cutting the same way. And then when I peel this off, I'll just flip it over and then I know which way is the top. So again, I'm just gonna drag it through to cut the piece. Okay. So I'm just rotating it back and pull this piece off. And look at that. That's going to be the top piece. It's going to go on this way. Oops, sorry, you can't see. It's off screen. Let's shift that. So this is the top piece. That's going to go on here. I'm going to set this aside and keep the direction straight so I don't mess things up. Okay, let's move this out of the way. So now I have the top and the bottom cut off. And again, this is this is the initial direction. I'm making sure I keep that the same. So now I'm going to cut the left side and then the right side. So I'm just going to rotate it on its side and slice it. Pick it up, rotate it back to starting position, and gently take off the side. Ooh, look at that ombre. The side is always the prettiest. That's going to give you the most. So that is going to go on this side. So I'm just going to stick that in the mold for now. And now I'm going to rotate it and cut the last side. Oh, isn't it pretty? Okay. And it's going to go right here. So now I have completed my frame. I will show you how I kind of attach it into the mold. And then I'll come back and make soap. Okay. I want to take a moment just to show you a couple different ways that you could use up. Like we have, this is what's left of our soap, right? We have this big block of soap. Now, I could, for this tall and skinny, I could actually cut this down in half because it's about 1 inch, which would create 2 thicknesses of my bars, and cut it in half and then just slice them into 3 bars, and I'd have basically full-size bars. So that's one thing I could do. I could keep cutting more frames. So if I did the exact same thing we just did and created another frame, I could create a floating frame. This was all white in the fragrance, really, really discolored. So the frame doesn't stand out as much anymore in this. I have a video on how to create the floating frame if you're interested, as well as a double frame. So you could cut 3 pieces, right? I cut this frame and then I cut 1 more. All I was left with was basically that little space, which I cut up and used as confetti soap. So you could keep making frames, right? The double frame's cool. I like it. You get a different ombre in each piece. So that's one option that you could do. You could cut these up. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to move this, my cutter down 1 so it's the thinnest slice as it can be. And it's going to cut it into little strips like this. They'll be straight, but I curved them and basically did what I'm calling a jelly wave technique. So I cut them, curved them, and then I embedded them in a batch of soap. I have a little grape decoration on top. So that's another thing you could do. You can also do abstract patterns. So this was one where I just cut them all up, cut them into different sizes, and then embedded them in a bar of soap. You could cut these into cubes, like I've done that, cut the remaining soap into a bunch of cubes and then kind of created a checker pattern in my soap. I've also taken this, poured a batch, and then just dropped it in to kind of create a frame around this block. There's lots of different ways that you can use up the remainder soap, so it will not go to waste. I just wanted to give you a few ideas on how you could do that. So yeah. I like to attach the sides so that they don't fall in, soap doesn't seep under, just create a seal for the frame. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in my mold. Maybe. Come on, out. Okay. I'm gonna just, this is my top. Let me move this over here so I just keep everything. So I just take some distilled water and I spray the side of the mold. And then just gently push down to make sure it's sealing with this bottom piece and against the wall to get it all sticking smoothly against that. Okay. You notice that I just rotated this around. I know that I just rotated this around. So now I'm gonna rotate it back. Again, just to make sure I'm keeping everything aligned. Now, this is my lighter green and this is my darker green, right? So I'm pretty good if I just follow it. I'll know which way the top is. But I am just overly cautious and I try and keep everything lined up throughout the whole process so that I get no mistakes. Just, you know, I've done it. I've made my whole mold design and then cut it and realized I put the top on backwards. This was on a subtle color change and this one's fairly subtle but not as subtle, and it's just very frustrating to do that and all that work and then cut it and go, oh, I put the top on wrong. Okay, so this is all set. I'm gonna go make a new batch of soap and I will come back and we will pour it. So for the inside design, there are lots of different options. Okay, so here are 3 designs that I've done with some different designs in them. So you can, I created a seam. This was I did this soap for the Framed Landscape Challenge with the Soap Challenge Club, creating that ombre and then a scene inside. This one, this was actually going to be the tutorial I did for this one, but I wasn't happy with how the ombre turned out. It was just not quite as, just didn't quite go as what I wanted. But again, these are embeds, but they're just lots and lots of butterflies. So there's not like I wasn't trying to create a scene or anything. I was just creating a fun inside. This one I did mica lines. So I just poured a little soap, added a mica line, poured more soap, and got this kind of cool effect. For this batch, I'm gonna pull out my dreaded squeeze bottles because we all know how much I dislike squeeze bottles, and I'm gonna do a teardrop, which I had done a design back in, I think it was November, like that, and it was just really cool. So I'm gonna see if I can recreate that and try that. You could do no inside, like you could just do a straight color if you wanted. You could try doing a swirl, like whatever you do inside, up to your imagination. My one advice to you is when you're doing the inside is think about the contrast. I think if you have contrasting colors, it's gonna stand out better. So here's another example. I was playing around with doing a light ombre frame, but then I did a dark inside. These are darker color, right? And then I did a white inside for these, and then contrasting colors for the embeds. So everything stands out. So that's what I want you to just kind of think about, is you want the frame to pop and stand out. So when you pick your colors, think about that. So I'm doing a teardrop. So I'm gonna pour about 1/4 to 1/3 of my white base into the mold. And I'm gonna take my squeeze bottles and I'm just going to go and drizzle a line down, and just then do that with the green and just keep repeating that for a while. Once I feel like I have enough color to kind of create that teardrop, I will then pour the rest of the soap, the white soap, in. So I'm just kind of creating a tiger swirl. So if you've ever done a tiger swirl, that's what I'm doing with this teardrop. Now, I don't want it to push too far out to the side. And if it starts doing that, that's generally, I'm like, okay, it's time to pour the white base now. And as much as I hate squeeze bottles really do make this technique easier, and you can control it and you're just going to get a better result. So I broke out my squeeze bottles. Now, you can put a little bit of soap, you can put more soap. As this starts to build up, I'm adding a few more passes of each color to it. The goal is to pour these evenly down the side to get the teardrop to the rest of that batter to push up. And I think I poured a little too much of the color and it's pushing out a tad too much, so is you need to make sure that you have the soap just to the top of the frame. If you don't have if it's not filled enough, when you cut it, you're going to have air gaps. If it's filled too much, it might, one, overflow, and two, create a gap, and so it won't be a complete seal. So that is the biggest goal, the biggest challenge is getting just enough soap, but not enough. Not too much that it overflows, and not too little that you'll have gaps. And I have a tad too much in here. Also, my mold has got rotated around a number of times. So I need to make sure that I move it back to the way, or that I put the top on the right way, basically. Okay, so I'm gonna put the top on now. This side's got more, so I'm gonna start from this side and hopefully push it up and try and get it sealed and get the soap to flow over, which I'll then scoop out. Because I want to make sure I get a, so just gonna start down and make sure I'm putting it in the right way. Okay, so I'm just gonna push on the edges. You don't want to push on the inside because you can break it. But I'm kind of pushing down on the edges to create that seal. So there we have it. I will come back tomorrow and we'll cut the soap and see what we have. Okay, so I've unmolded my frame. So this side's not bad. You can see this side pushes up, like I couldn't get there was just too much soap. And you can see in the center here, there's going to be a line. So not a perfect frame. I had too much soap in the batter, but you can see the ombre, which is really pretty. I have no idea what the inside is going to look like. It's supposed to be a teardrop, but the ends, both ends are so drastically different. I have no idea what I'm going to see when I cut it. I really hope it's a teardrop and not some blob. So let's cut it and see. I am very curious about this one. I really hope it worked. Oh, okay. Well, somewhat promising. Okay. So, it's an interesting teardrop, but I'll take it. It's not awful. And you can see, look at this, you got the green going through and then the light green on the outsides. So that's a cool ombre. You can see that little gap there, right? Where I had too much white, too much batter in the, and it caused it to not, like the frame couldn't close completely. So it's definitely something you want to watch out for. This end should be better because, so that's a little bit better. This teardrop is very interesting. One, you really don't get a whole lot of the tiger swirl, more so here. And two, it's interesting. Like, you got the base and then the top just got skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. Like, just not quite what I was expecting. Like I said, it's not bad, it's not ruined, it's just I didn't know what I would get when I did this teardrop. And I knew it was a chance because my teardrops never seem to end up like teardrops. But that's okay. I said the biggest mistake on this is there was too much soap, right? So I couldn't close the frame completely. Like, that side's not bad. So some bars are okay, some bars are definitely a little more, you can tell. But the ombre itself is really pretty. Like, I just love how it kind of just floats around. It's pretty, like, and I love green. Green's one of my favorite colors. So this one just speaks to me because, again, green. I love green. And I especially love this dark green. And yeah. So that is our frame. So that's how you do it. There are multiple steps. Definitely takes some time and patience to do this technique, but I really think the results are pretty. So